Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Earth flagship Defiance, watching the alien homeworld grow larger on the viewscreen. Nexus Prime looked like a jewel floating in space. Its cities glowed with soft blue light and massive crystal towers reached up toward the stars. After 3 years of brutal war, seeing something so beautiful felt strange. "Ma'am, the Confederation fleet is sending escort ships," reported Lieutenant Davis from his station. "They want to guide us to the orbital platform." Sarah nodded. The alien ships were sleek and elegant, nothing like the brutal warships that had bombarded Earth's colonies. These vessels looked more like works of art than instruments of war. Everything about this felt wrong to her, but Earth's government had ordered her to sign this peace treaty. The war had cost humanity dearly. 2 billion people were dead. Entire star systems had been turned to ash. Earth's military was exhausted, running on empty supplies and broken spirits. When the Galactic Confederation suddenly offered peace talks, Earth's leaders had jumped at the chance. Captain Marcus Torres approached her side. He was the head of Earth's intelligence service, a man who never smiled and trusted no one. "Admiral, I've been reviewing the treaty documents again. There are still sections that concern me." Sarah looked at him. Torres had been warning everyone about this treaty for weeks. "What now, Marcus?" Page 47, Section 12. They want to establish cultural integration centers on all human worlds. Page 63 mentions reproductive guidance programs to help humanity develop more peaceful tendencies. Page 91 requires all human military research to be approved by Confederation advisors. Sarah frowned. The negotiators said these were standard procedures for new member species. "That's what they said," Torres replied. "But I've been digging into Confederation history. Do you know what happened to the Kepler Republic?" "Never heard of them." "Exactly." Torres handed her a data pad. They were a species similar to humans. Independent, aggressive, hard to control. 28 years ago, they signed a peace treaty with the Confederation. 27 years ago, they disappeared completely from galactic records. Before Sarah could respond, the communications officer called out, "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Confederation High Council. They're ready to begin the ceremony." Sarah took a deep breath. Earth needed this peace. The alternative was the complete destruction of humanity. "Signal our acceptance. Prepare the shuttles." An hour later, Sarah found herself in the most beautiful room she had ever seen. The Confederation's council chamber was enormous, with walls made of some kind of living crystal that changed colors as she watched. Representatives from 12 different alien species sat around a massive circular table. The Zephyrian ambassador stood first. Zephyrians looked almost human, except for their silver skin and completely black eyes. "Admiral Chen, we welcome humanity to this Council of Peace. Today marks the end of an unfortunate conflict and the beginning of a new friendship." The Catherian representative spoke next. Catherians were tall and thin with blue skin and forearms. "The Confederation offers humanity 3 worlds rich in resources. We offer advanced medical technology that will extend human life by centuries. We offer protection under Confederation law." Sarah listened as each species offered gifts and promises. Food production technology from the Merlians, advanced education systems from the Kuvari, energy technology from the Soldanians. It all sounded too good to be true. "In return," continued the Zephyrian, "humanity must agree to certain guidelines. These guidelines have helped maintain peace in the galaxy for over 3,000 years." The treaty was presented on a crystal tablet that glowed with alien writing. Sarah's translator device converted it to English, but the language was complex and formal. She noticed Torres taking notes on everything, his face getting darker with each page. "The 3 worlds we offer are New Terra, Hope's End, and Genesis Colony," explained the Catherian. "Each has been prepared for human settlement. Your people can begin moving there immediately." "What about Earth?" Sarah asked. "Earth will remain your homeworld, of course, but the new worlds will provide room for humanity to grow under proper guidance." That word again. Guidance. Sarah didn't like how often the aliens used it. The ceremony took 4 hours. Sarah signed the treaty on behalf of humanity while the aliens watched. Each alien representative added their own signature using different methods. Some wrote with light, others with sound. One species somehow signed using scent. After the ceremony, Sarah was invited to tour Nexus Prime. The city was incredible. Buildings that grew like plants. Vehicles that floated silently through the air. and millions of beings from different species all living together peacefully. But Torres noticed other things. He saw the security cameras that watched every corner. He noticed how certain areas were blocked off to visitors. He observed that all the different species seemed to dress alike and act alike, as if they had forgotten their own cultures. "Admiral," Torres whispered as they walked through a market district, "look at the children." Sarah looked around and realized what he meant. The young beings of every species looked almost identical in how they behaved. They all moved the same way, spoke in the same tone, even played similar games. It was as if someone had erased their natural differences. "This isn't diversity," Torres continued quietly. "This is control." Their guide, a friendly Merlian with green fur and huge eyes, overheard them. "Oh yes, the integration education system is one of our greatest achievements. It helps young beings develop proper social attitudes, very effective at reducing conflict and aggression." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean by proper social attitudes?" "Well, some species are naturally more violent or unpredictable. The education system helps correct these dangerous tendencies. Your human children will benefit greatly from it." That night, in their quarters aboard the Defiance, Sarah and Torres met privately. The room was probably being watched, but they had to talk. "They're going to do to us what they did to those other species," Torres said quietly. "The Kepler Republic, the Andorian League, the Tau Collective. I found records of 15 different species that signed similar treaties. All of them disappeared within 30 years. "How?" Sarah asked. "Slowly, carefully. First, they separate families by moving people to different worlds. Then they start the cultural integration programs. Children are educated to be ashamed of their heritage. Adults are given medical treatments that change their brain chemistry. After a generation, the species stops being what it was." Sarah stared out the window at the alien stars. "Earth's government won't believe this. They want peace too badly. Then we have to prepare for what's coming," Torres said. "We need to set up networks, hidden supplies, secret bases. If I'm right about what the Confederation is really doing, humanity will need to be ready to fight a different kind of war." "What kind of war?" Torres looked grim. "A war for our very existence. A war where the enemy smiles while they destroy us." Sarah made her decision. "Do what you have to do, Marcus. But keep it quiet. If the Confederation suspects we know their real plan, they might decide to skip the slow approach and just wipe us out directly." As the Defiance prepared to return to Earth with news of the peace treaty, Torres began sending coded messages to his agents throughout human space. The treaty had been signed, but the real battle for humanity's survival was just beginning. The aliens thought they had won. They thought humanity would be just another species to quietly disappear into their collective. But they had made one critical mistake. They had assumed that humans would give up without a fight. They were about to learn how wrong they were. 6 months after the treaty signing, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in her new laboratory on New Terra and tried not to scream in frustration. The medical equipment the Confederation had provided was advanced beyond anything humanity had ever seen. It could heal wounds in minutes, cure diseases that had plagued mankind for centuries, and extend human life far beyond normal limits. It could also do something else, something the aliens hadn't mentioned. Elena stared at the test results on her screen. Every single medical treatment the Confederation provided contained genetic modifiers, tiny changes to human DNA that would affect how people thought and felt. The modifications were subtle, designed to reduce aggression, increase compliance, and make humans more accepting of authority. "Dr. Vasquez?" Her assistant, David Kim, entered the lab. "The Confederation Health Inspector wants to speak with you about your research." Elena quickly closed her files. "Tell him I'll be right there." The inspector was a Kuvari named Helmoren. Kuvari looked like tall, thin humans with pale blue skin and large black eyes. They always seemed to be smiling, but Elena found their smiles cold and empty. "Dr. Vasquez, I noticed you've been running unauthorized tests on our medical treatments," Helmoren said in his smooth voice. "Is there some problem with the equipment?" "Just routine quality checks," Elena lied. "I want to make sure everything is working properly for human biology." "How thoughtful. But such tests are unnecessary. The Confederation has used this technology successfully with many species. Perhaps you should focus on treating patients instead of questioning our generosity." After the inspector left, Elena felt sick. The alien's words sounded friendly, but the threat underneath was clear. Stop asking questions or face consequences. Meanwhile, on Earth, Captain Torres was discovering that the planet was changing in ways that had nothing to do with advanced technology. Confederation advisors had arrived in every major city, ostensibly to help humanity adapt to their new role in galactic society. But Torres noticed what they were really doing. In New York, Confederation advisors had convinced the city government to implement a social credit system. Citizens who showed positive attitudes toward alien culture got better jobs and housing. Those who complained or asked too many questions found themselves unable to travel or access certain services. In London, the advisors had established cultural re-evaluation centers where humans could learn to overcome their primitive, aggressive tendencies. Anyone who criticized the Confederation or suggested that Earth should maintain its independence was encouraged to attend these sessions for their own good. In Tokyo, the education system had been completely overhauled. Children now learned that human history was filled with violence and mistakes, while alien civilizations were peaceful and wise. Earth's wars, its art, its literature, all of it was presented as evidence of humanity's need for guidance. Torres met with his network of agents in an abandoned subway tunnel beneath Chicago. There were 23 of them now, former military officers and intelligence operatives who had noticed the same disturbing patterns. "It's happening faster than we expected," reported Agent Lisa Park, who had been monitoring the situation in Europe. "They're separating families. They call it the Voluntary Relocation Program. But families who refuse to participate lose access to food, rationing, and medical care. Same thing in Asia," said Agent Chen Wu. "Parents are being told their children will receive better education and opportunities if they attend Confederation boarding schools. The kids who come back, they're different. They act polite and obedient, but they won't talk about their families anymore. They call their parents by their first names instead of mom and dad." Torres felt a cold anger growing inside him. "What about the colonies?" Agent Rodriguez, who had just returned from Hope's End, looked grim. "Sir, the colonies are prisons. Beautiful prisons, but prisons nonetheless. The resource-rich worlds they promised us are stripped bare. The infrastructure is designed for surveillance, not settlement. Every building has monitoring systems. Every person is tracked constantly. And the resources they promised? Already mined out and shipped away. The colonists are basically prisoners doing make-work projects while the Confederation studies how they behave under controlled conditions." Torres shared what Elena had discovered about the medical treatments. The room fell silent as the full scope of the Confederation's plan became clear. "They're not just conquering us," Torres said quietly. "They're erasing us. In 20 years, there won't be humans anymore. There will just be another species of docile aliens who look like humans but think like Confederation citizens." Agent Park raised her hand. "Sir, what about Admiral Chen? She signed the treaty, but she's been asking questions lately." Torres had been wondering about that himself. Admiral Chen had been promoted to head of Earth's military liaison with the Confederation, but she'd been sending coded messages to old contacts. Careful messages that didn't say much but asked specific questions about troop movements and supply chains. "I think the Admiral is starting to understand what we're dealing with," Torres said. "But we can't approach her directly. If the Confederation suspects she's working with us, they'll remove her immediately." "So what do we do?" asked Agent Wu. Torres had been thinking about this for weeks. The Confederation was too powerful to fight directly. Their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's, and their military forces could destroy Earth with ease. But they had one weakness. They had done this before, and they were overconfident. "We're going to do something they won't expect," Torres said. "We're going to pretend to be exactly what they want us to become." He outlined his plan. Instead of fighting the Confederation's assimilation process, they would appear to embrace it. Torres's agents would volunteer for the cultural reevaluation programs and come out acting like model Confederation citizens. They would take jobs working directly with alien administrators. They would send their children to Confederation schools and teach those children to play roles. "We're going to infiltrate them from the inside," Torres explained. "Every Confederation facility on human worlds, every alien administrator, every surveillance system, we're going to put our people everywhere. And we're going to do it so well that they'll never suspect we're still fighting back." Agent Rodriguez looked confused. "But sir, what about the genetic modifications? The mind control drugs? How do we resist those?" Torres smiled grimly. Dr. Vasquez is working on that problem. But the most important thing is this: we have to be patient. This isn't a war we can win in months or years. It might take decades. We need to be willing to let them think they've won while we prepare for the real fight. Back on New Terra, Elena was making progress on countermeasures to the Confederation's medical treatments. Working in secret, using equipment she had smuggled from Earth, she was developing vaccines that would protect human brain chemistry from the alien modifications. But she was also making another discovery. The Confederation's database contained detailed records of their previous assimilation campaigns. Elena found genetic samples from the Kepler Republic, the Andorian League, and 13 other extinct species. All of them had been subjected to the same process humanity was experiencing now. But there was something else in the records. Evidence that some individuals from these species had resisted the modifications longer than others. People who had maintained their original personality and memories even after years of treatment. The Confederation had classified these individuals as genetic anomalies and eventually eliminated them. But their existence proved that resistance was possible. Elena began designing her countermeasures based on the genetic patterns of these natural resistors. If she could replicate their immunity, she could protect key members of the human resistance while making it look like the medical treatments were working normally. Late one night, as Elena worked alone in her lab, she received an encrypted message from Torres. It was short and simple. The doctor will make house calls. The patients will recover slowly. Elena understood. Torres was telling her that the resistance was ready to begin the long process of infiltrating the Confederation. Her job was to make sure that the people doing the infiltrating remained human on the inside, no matter how much they might appear to change on the outside. She looked at her research notes and smiled. The Confederation thought they understood human nature, that humans would give up their identity to survive. They were about to learn that some things were more important to humans than survival. The aliens wanted to erase humanity slowly and quietly, but humanity was going to erase them right back, and the Confederation wouldn't know what was happening until it was far too late to stop it. The war for humanity's soul was about to begin in earnest. 2 years had passed since the treaty signing, and Lieutenant James Park was teaching his daughter how to kill with her bare hands. On the surface, it looked like a father and daughter practicing traditional Korean martial arts in their backyard. To anyone watching, including the Confederation surveillance systems, it was just another example of humans embracing their cultural heritage. But Sarah Park, now 10 years old, was learning much more than martial arts. She was learning how to move silently, how to disable electronic systems, and how to recognize the weak points in different alien anatomies. Most importantly, she was learning to do all of this while appearing to be a perfect Confederation citizen. "Remember, little star," James whispered as they practiced forms, "the key is patience. We bow to the masters while we sharpen our knives." Sarah nodded seriously. She understood that her real education wasn't happening at the Confederation integration school she attended every day. Her real learning happened in moments like this, in secret sessions with her father and other resistance families. The resistance had grown in ways that Torres had never imagined possible. What had started as 23 agents had become a network of thousands. Parents, teachers, doctors, engineers, ordinary humans who had realized what the Confederation was really doing and decided to fight back in the only way that had a chance of working. Dr. Elena Vasquez had become a hero to these families. Her vaccines protected key resistance members from the genetic modification drugs, but more importantly, she had developed something else, a way to fake the effects of the modifications. Resistance members could take her treatments and appear to become docile and compliant, while actually remaining completely human inside. The deception was working perfectly. Confederation administrators praised human worlds for their rapid adaptation to galactic society. Crime rates had dropped to almost zero. Humans seemed eager to embrace alien culture and abandon their violent past. Several species that had been skeptical of humanity's integration were now pointing to Earth as an example of successful assimilation. But the reality was very different. The humans committing fewer crimes weren't becoming peaceful. They were becoming disciplined. The humans embracing alien culture weren't abandoning their heritage. They were learning everything they could about their enemies. The humans who seemed most loyal to the Confederation were often the ones gathering intelligence for Torres's growing network. Captain Torres himself had undergone the most dramatic transformation of all. Officially, he had volunteered for advanced cultural integration and emerged as Marcus Salin, a dedicated Confederation citizen who worked as a security consultant for alien administrators. His job gave him access to classified information about Confederation military capabilities, political structures, and long-term plans for humanity. What he learned made his blood run cold. Humanity wasn't the Confederation's 15th assimilation project. It was their final one. After humanity was absorbed, the Confederation planned to stop expanding and focus on perfecting their control over the galaxy. They would have achieved their goal of universal peace through the elimination of all independent thinking species. But Torres also learned something else. The Confederation's military, while technologically superior, was completely dependent on automated systems and predictable tactics. They hadn't fought a real war in over 1,000 years. Their current forces were designed for policing conquered territories, not fighting determined enemies. More importantly, the Confederation's leadership had become lazy and overconfident. They assigned the most important security positions to reliable members of conquered species, never imagining that those species might maintain any loyalty to their origins. This meant that humans were being placed in positions throughout the Confederation's infrastructure, from low-level technicians to high-ranking administrators. Admiral Sarah Chen had also changed dramatically since the treaty signing. Publicly, she had embraced her role as Earth's military liaison with the Confederation, praising alien technology and advocating for deeper integration. Privately, she had become the Resistance's most valuable asset within the official government structure. Sarah met with Torres in a safe house hidden beneath the ruins of old Detroit. The city had been largely abandoned after the Confederation's arrival, making it perfect for clandestine activities. "Marcus, we have a problem," Sarah said, using his real name despite his official identity change. "The Confederation is accelerating their timeline. They want to implement the Great Integration within 18 months instead of the original 5 years." Torres frowned. The Great Integration was the Confederation's plan to relocate most of humanity to controlled worlds throughout their territory, breaking up the species completely. "Why the rush?" "They're concerned about reports of human adaptability anomalies," and Sarah explained. "Some of their researchers have noticed that humans are learning alien technology faster than expected. They're worried we might become too dangerous if left on our own worlds too long." This was actually good news in disguise. It meant the Resistance's intelligence-gathering operations were so successful that even the Confederation's own researchers were noticing humanity's rapid advancement. But it also meant they had less time than planned. "How many people are we talking about?" Torres asked. 4 billion humans relocated to 12 different Confederation worlds. Complete separation of families and communities. Children under 16 sent to specialized education facilities. Adults assigned jobs based on Confederation needs rather than human preferences. Torres felt a familiar cold anger. They're not just breaking us up. They're making sure we can never organize resistance again. "That's what they think," Sarah said with a grim smile. "But they don't understand what they're dealing with. Every human they relocate will be in a position to gather intelligence about a different part of their territory. Every child they send to their schools will learn their weaknesses from the inside. They think they're dividing us, but they're actually giving us access to their entire civilization." Torres realized she was right. The Confederation's plan to scatter humanity throughout their territory would backfire spectacularly if the Resistance was prepared for it. Instead of destroying human unity, it would give them unprecedented opportunities for infiltration and intelligence gathering. "We need to accelerate our own timeline," Torres said. "How many Resistance members do we have in critical positions?" Sarah consulted a hidden data pad. 1,700 in Confederation administrative positions, 3,000 in technical and scientific roles, 800 in security and military positions. And those are just the ones we know about. Dr. Vasquez estimates she's provided protection to over 50,000 people. What about the children? That's where Lieutenant Park's project becomes crucial. He's been training kids throughout the human colonies. They're learning to maintain their humanity, while appearing to be perfect Confederation citizens. When they're relocated to alien schools, they'll be in position to influence an entire generation of aliens. Torres thought about young Sarah Park, and thousands of children like her. Kids who were learning to be warriors while playing games, gathering intelligence while doing homework, and preparing for war while singing songs of peace. The Confederation had no idea what was coming. "There's something else," Admiral Chen continued. "I've been in communication with other resistance cells. Apparently, we're not the only species that has maintained hidden opposition to the Confederation." Torres looked surprised. Other species? But they were all successfully integrated. That's what the Confederation believes. But I've been receiving coded messages from groups that claim to represent survivors from the Kepler Republic, the Andorian League, and at least 4 other supposedly extinct civilizations. Small numbers, but they've been hiding for decades, waiting for the right moment to strike back. This changed everything. If other conquered species had maintained resistance movements, then humanity wouldn't be fighting alone. More importantly, these older resistance groups would have detailed knowledge of Confederation weaknesses that had taken decades to discover. "Can we trust them?" Torres asked. "I don't know yet, but the information they've shared so far has checked out. They know things about Confederation technology and politics that they couldn't know, unless they really are what they claim to be." Torres made his decision. "Set up a meeting. If there are other species fighting the Confederation, we need to coordinate our efforts. The Great Integration might actually be the opportunity we've been waiting for." As they prepared to leave the safe house, Admiral Chen asked the question that had been bothering her for months. "Marcus, do you really think we can win this? We're talking about overthrowing a galactic government that's controlled space for 3,000 years. Torres thought about all the humans who had chosen to resist, rather than accept a comfortable slavery. He thought about children learning to fight while pretending to play. He thought about families willing to be separated for decades if it meant humanity might someday be free. "Sarah, the Confederation has one fatal weakness. They've forgotten what it means to fight for something more important than comfort and safety." 20 years had passed since the signing of the Treaty of Centauri, and Captain Lisa Chen stood in the command center of the Confederation Defense Station, orbiting Nexus Prime. To anyone watching, she was the perfect example of successful human integration, calm, efficient, and completely loyal to galactic peace. But inside her mind, Lisa was counting enemy ships and memorizing security codes. She had spent 2 decades working her way up through the Confederation military hierarchy, and now she held one of the most sensitive positions in their entire defense network. The aliens trusted her completely, never suspecting that Admiral Sarah Chen's daughter had inherited more than just her mother's tactical brilliance. The Great Integration had proceeded exactly as the Confederation planned. Humanity had been scattered across 12 different star systems, families separated, children educated in alien schools. From the Confederation's perspective, the human problem had been solved. Earth itself now served mainly as a historical curiosity, with small populations of humans maintained as examples of their species' successful transformation. But the Confederation had made a critical error. They had assumed that scattering humanity would break their resistance. Instead, it had given the resistance unprecedented access to every level of alien society. Dr. James Park, formerly Lieutenant James Park, now served as the Confederation's chief military advisor for integrated species management. His job was to help alien commanders understand how to best utilize former humans in military roles. What they didn't know was that Park had been using his position to place resistance members throughout the Confederation fleet, often in positions that gave them access to the most sensitive military information. His daughter Sarah, now 30 years old, worked as a cultural liaison on the Confederation High Council itself. She was responsible for ensuring that integrated humans maintained proper attitudes toward their alien benefactors. Her reports consistently praised humanity's successful adaptation and recommended that the Confederation use human integration methods with future conquered species. But Sarah's real job was coordinating the largest intelligence network in galactic history. Every human who had been scattered by the Great Integration had become an intelligence asset. Teachers in alien schools reported on military education programs. Technicians in research facilities gathered data on new weapon systems. Workers in mining operations mapped resource distribution throughout Confederation territory. Most importantly, humans had been placed in positions throughout the Confederation government and military. They served as translators, advisors, technicians, and analysts. The aliens had come to depend on human efficiency and reliability. never imagining that this dependence was part of a carefully orchestrated plan. The breakthrough came when Sarah made contact with the other resistance movements that Admiral Chen had discovered years earlier. The meeting took place in a hidden facility on a dead world in the Tau sector, far from any Confederation patrol routes. Representatives from 6 supposedly extinct civilizations attended the meeting. There was Kethril, a survivor of the Kepler Republic who had spent 28 years infiltrating Confederation scientific institutions. Morvain represented the remnants of the Andorian League, who had maintained a hidden network of ships and bases for over 50 years. Each group had maintained their resistance in secret, gathering intelligence and waiting for the right moment to strike. "The time has come," Kethril announced. "Our analysis shows that the Confederation military has become completely dependent on integrated species for critical functions. Over 60% of their technical personnel are from conquered civilizations. If we coordinate our efforts, we can cripple their entire infrastructure." Sarah studied the data these groups had gathered. It was incredible. Detailed maps of every major Confederation facility, complete personnel records for military commanders, even technical specifications for their most advanced weapons systems. The older resistance movements had spent decades preparing for this moment. "What about their fleet?" asked Dr. Park. "They still have overwhelming numerical superiority." Morvain smiled grimly. "Not as overwhelming as they think. Our people have been sabotaging ship construction for decades. Subtle weaknesses in hull design, flaws in weapon systems, backdoors in computer networks. When the time comes, much of their fleet will be useless." But the most shocking revelation came from a representative of the Vorth Collective, a species that had been integrated over 100 years earlier. "The Confederation leadership doesn't even know how many of their people are actually resistance members," she explained. "We estimate that at least 30% of all Confederation personnel are secretly loyal to their original species." Sarah realized the full scope of what they were planning. This wouldn't just be humanity's rebellion against the Confederation. It would be a coordinated uprising by dozens of supposedly conquered civilizations, all striking simultaneously at every level of alien society. "When do we begin?" Sarah asked. "Soon," replied Kethril. "The Confederation is planning to integrate another species, the Rigel Syndicate. It will be their largest military operation in centuries, and they're pulling resources from throughout their territory. That will be our moment." Back on Nexus Prime, Captain Lisa Chen received the activation signal through a channel hidden in routine maintenance reports. The message was simple: Protocol Lazarus is now active. The dead will rise. Throughout Confederation space, humans and members of other resistance movements received similar signals. Teachers prepared to take control of communication systems. Technicians got ready to sabotage critical facilities. Military advisors positioned themselves to strike at command centers. The signal spread through networks that had taken decades to build. Hidden bases that had been supplied by supposedly loyal workers suddenly activated. Ships that had been secretly modified by their integrated crews prepared for battle. Weapons caches that had been accumulated over 20 years were distributed to resistance cells. On Earth, the few remaining humans received a different message. Admiral Sarah Chen, now 70 years old but still commanding the planet's defense forces, called her staff together for a final briefing. "Today we stop pretending," she announced. "For 20 years we've played the role of grateful subjects. For 20 years we've bowed to the masters while we sharpened our knives. Today, the Confederation learns what humanity really thinks of their generous peace." The first strike came without warning. As the Confederation fleet prepared for their operation against the Rigel Syndicate, critical systems throughout their territory began failing simultaneously. Communication networks went dark. Defense stations lost power. Supply depots exploded from within. But the real shock came when the Confederation leadership realized the scope of the betrayal. The humans they had trusted with their most sensitive positions weren't just sabotaging equipment. They were seizing control of entire facilities. The cultural liaisons they had relied on for decades were coordinating attacks on their colleagues. The military advisors who had helped them plan operations were now using that knowledge against them. Commander Helmoran, the same Kuvari who had once inspected Dr. Vasquez's laboratory, found himself trapped in his own command center as his human staff revealed their true loyalties. "This is impossible," he said in shock. "You've been integrated for 20 years. The treatments, the education, the conditioning, it should have made you incapable of this level of deception." Captain Lisa Chen, no longer bothering to hide her contempt, replied calmly. "Did you really think we would forgive? Did you really think we would forget? Humanity remembers every species you've erased, every family you've destroyed, every culture you've murdered in the name of peace." Throughout the galaxy, similar scenes played out as the resistance revealed itself. The Confederation's entire government structure collapsed within hours as their most trusted personnel turned against them. Military units found themselves commanded by enemies who knew all their weaknesses. Research facilities were seized by the very people who had been helping to run them. The Confederation's response was swift but confused. Fleet commanders tried to rally their forces, only to discover that many of their ships had been sabotaged. Government leaders attempted to coordinate a response, only to find that their communication systems were controlled by the resistance. But the most devastating blow came when Admiral Chen broadcast a message throughout Confederation space. The transmission went out on every channel, in every language, reaching every world in their territory. "People of the galaxy," she began, "today you learn the truth about your peaceful confederation. For 3,000 years they have been committing genocide, not with weapons or violence, but with lies and manipulation. They have erased entire civilizations, turning proud species into mindless servants." The broadcast included evidence that the resistance had gathered over decades, records of the assimilation process, genetic analysis showing the modifications done to conquered species, historical documents proving that dozens of civilizations had been deliberately destroyed. The species you thought had joined the Confederation willingly were. 6 months after the initial uprising, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the ruins of the Confederation High Council chamber on Nexus Prime. The beautiful crystal walls were cracked and dark, the elegant furniture destroyed by fighting. But Sarah wasn't looking at the destruction. She was looking at the dozen alien leaders kneeling before her in surrender. The war had been brutal but swift. Once the resistance revealed itself, the Confederation's military advantages had evaporated overnight. Their ships were sabotaged from within, their communications controlled by enemies, their supply lines cut by people they had trusted. Within 3 months, every major Confederation stronghold had fallen to the combined forces of the liberated species. But Sarah took no joy in the victory. Too much had been lost over the centuries. Too many civilizations had been erased before they could fight back. "You offered us a choice between slavery and extinction," Sarah said to the defeated aliens. "Now I offer you the same courtesy." The Zephyrian who had once welcomed humanity to the Confederation looked up with his silver face twisted in fear. "Admiral, please. We can negotiate. We can offer you anything you want. Resources, territory, technology. What can you offer the Kepler Republic?" Sarah interrupted. "What can you give back to the Andorian League? How do you restore 43 extinct civilizations?" The alien had no answer. None of them did. Sarah had spent months studying the complete records of the Confederation's assimilation campaigns. The scope of the genocide was staggering. Over 3,000 years, they had deliberately destroyed hundreds of unique civilizations. Billions of individuals had been genetically modified, culturally erased, and psychologically broken, until nothing remained of who they had originally been. The worst part was that the Confederation leadership had genuinely believed they were doing good. In their minds, they had brought peace to a chaotic galaxy by eliminating the sources of conflict: independent thought, cultural diversity, and species identity. They had created a galaxy-wide society where everyone thought alike, acted alike, and wanted the same things. They had called it paradise. Sarah called it hell. "The Terran Republic offers membership to any species that chooses to join us freely," Sarah announced. "But membership comes with responsibilities. Every species will maintain its own culture, its own government, and its own military. We will cooperate, but we will never surrender our independence to anyone." Some of the Confederation's member species chose to join the new republic. The Merlians, who had been among the first conquered civilizations, were eager to rediscover their lost heritage. The Kuvari split into factions, with some joining the Republic while others tried to maintain the old system. The Catherians attempted to flee to unexplored regions of space, but found their escape routes blocked by human fleets. But not everyone wanted peace. Several species that had benefited from the Confederation's rule refused to accept the new order. They formed their own alliance and declared war on the Republic, believing that superior numbers and desperation would overcome the rebels. They were wrong. The Confederation War, as historians would later call it, lasted 2 years and ended in complete victory for the Republic forces. The fighting was different from anything the galaxy had seen in millennia. Where the old Confederation military had relied on overwhelming technological superiority and predictable tactics, the Republic forces used flexibility, innovation, and what their enemies learned to fear as human unpredictability. Captain Lisa Chen commanded the human fleet in the Battle of Rigel, where outnumbered Republic forces destroyed a Confederation remnant fleet twice their size by using tactics that broke every rule of space warfare. Instead of forming traditional battle lines, human ships scattered in seemingly random patterns, attacking from unexpected angles and using their knowledge of alien psychology to create chaos in enemy formations. Dr. James Park led the ground assault on Catherian Prime, where Republic forces faced entrenched defenders in heavily fortified cities. Instead of the frontal assaults that aliens expected, Park's troops used guerrilla tactics learned during humanity's resistance years. They struck at infrastructure, disrupted communications, and turned the aliens' own surveillance systems against them. But the most decisive battle was fought by Sarah Park, now 32 years old and commanding her own ship. When Confederation remnant forces made a desperate attack on Earth itself, Sarah led the defense using a strategy that no alien commander could have anticipated. Instead of protecting Earth cities, Sarah evacuated the civilian population and then used the planet as bait. When the alien fleet arrived expecting to find a desperate defensive battle, they found empty cities rigged with explosives. As they tried to figure out what was happening, Republic forces struck from hidden positions throughout the solar system. The battle was over in 6 hours. The last major Confederation fleet was completely destroyed, and their commanders were captured alive to face trial for their crimes against galactic civilization. But victory in war was only the beginning. The real challenge was building something better from the ruins of the Confederation. Admiral Sarah Chen, now President of the Terran Republic, established the Memorial Worlds, star systems dedicated to preserving the memory of extinct civilizations. Using DNA samples and cultural records recovered from Confederation archives, Republic scientists began the long process of resurrecting lost species and forgotten cultures. The Kepler Republic was re-established on a world near their original homeworld, with cloned populations grown from genetic material and educated using recovered historical records. The Andorian League's survivors, who had spent 50 years in hiding, finally came forward to reclaim their heritage and rebuild their civilization. Most importantly, the Republic established the Department of Remembrance, tasked with ensuring that the galaxy would never forget the cost of forced unity. Every school in Republic space taught the history of the Confederation's crimes. Every government building displayed memorials to the extinct civilizations. Every military academy included courses on recognizing and preventing genocide. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now in her 70s, established the Institute for Cultural Preservation. Her teams traveled throughout the galaxy, documenting the traditions, languages, and beliefs of every species they encountered. Never again would a civilization disappear without leaving a trace. But the most important change was philosophical. The Republic Constitution included a fundamental principle that had been absent from galactic civilization for thousands of years: the right to be different. Every species, every culture, every individual had the absolute right to maintain their own identity, regardless of how others might disapprove. This led to conflicts, of course. Some species had traditions that others found disturbing. Some cultures had practices that seemed primitive or dangerous. But the Republic had learned from humanity's darkest moments that the alternative to tolerance was inevitably genocide. 25 years after the fall of the Confederation, Sarah Chen stood in her office on New Geneva, the Republic's capital world. She was reading reports from exploration teams that had discovered 3 new civilizations in previously unexplored regions of space. All 3 species were being contacted according to Republic protocols, with respect, honesty, and absolute guarantees of their right to remain independent. A knock at her door interrupted her reading. Lisa Chen, now Admiral of the Republic Fleet, entered with a concerned expression. "Mom, we have a problem. The Vorth Collective has been making contact with species beyond our borders. They're offering technology and protection in exchange for voluntary cultural integration. Sound familiar?" Sarah felt a familiar cold anger. Some species never learned. How many ships do they have? Enough to threaten the 3 new civilizations we just contacted, but not enough to fight us directly. Sarah thought about the choice ahead. The Republic could intervene and protect the new species, but that would mean imposing their will on others. Exactly what the Confederation had done. They could do nothing and let the Vorth repeat the cycle of cultural genocide. Or they could find a third option. Send a message to the Vorth leadership, Sarah decided. Tell them that the Republic is willing to discuss their concerns about galactic security. But make it clear that we will not tolerate any attempts to force integration on unwilling species. Lisa smiled. And if they refuse to negotiate? Sarah looked out her window at the stars, thinking about all the civilizations that had been lost to forced peace. Then we remind them why humanity earned its reputation for unpredictability. Some lessons need to be taught more than once. The galaxy was free, but freedom required constant vigilance. The Republic would continue to grow, to explore, to discover new worlds and new civilizations. And wherever they went, they would carry with them the memory of what had been lost and the determination to ensure it never happened again. Humanity had kept its promise. They had remembered. They had endured. And now they would protect others from the same fate they had barely escaped. The age of forced peace was over. The age of chosen diversity had begun. And in schools throughout Republic space, children of dozens of species learned the most important lesson humanity had to teach. Never forget, never surrender, never let anyone tell you that slavery is peace.